In our last 10-minute art fix, we looked at Rome's use of concrete for building, lighter and cheaper and more efficient than cut stone, but at the same time quite unattractive. And thus the practice in ancient Rome of covering it with plaster that was molded and painted to look like marble slabs, a more expensive material but not cheap. In the 1st century BC, we saw the painted decorations become much more three-dimensional and illusionistic, where the wall appears to not be flat anymore, but gives the illusion of space, and with great detail showing us here a landscape. This we call the second style of Roman wall painting, and the most important style, I think, of early Roman painting. In this 10-minute art fix, we'll focus on one of the more interesting examples of the second style of Roman wall painting, the so-called Villa of the Mysteries. This is a villa on the outskirts of Pompeii, also destroyed in 1st century AD, or covered with ash, but it sits outside the center. Here's where the Forum and the Civic Temple are. It's outside here. And it was used by members of a cult dedicated to Bacchus, the god of wine, the Roman version of Dionysus. Now, this temple to Bacchus, used by the cult of Bacchus, is very different from the Roman state temple that was dedicated to the highest god in the heavens, Jupiter, their version of Zeus. Rome, like ancient Greece, was pantheistic. They had adopted all of Greece's gods and then added to them as well. And in ancient Rome, for all of these different temples to different gods, they used houses for cult worship of the different gods. Often these were in a single district, not always, but they tended to get tax breaks and be labeled as a house of worship. So this is in one of the rooms of the villa that was used by the cult. I think it might be this room here. I've not been, so I can't tell you for sure. And in the decorations on the inside, we see a mysterious induction ceremony into the cult that begins along the left wall here. So we'll look at this in some depth. It shows actually 3 different scenes with the same character, her. This is an inductee into the cult, and she, in the first scene, is being brought to the cult by what we think is probably her mother, although there's a lot left unexplained, which is why we call it the Villa of the Mysteries. But there's our virgin inductee, having moved past one of the priestesses in the cult, holding an offering in her hand, probably something she's going to present to Bacchus as she moves across the wall. At the feet of the priestess is a young boy reading something from a scroll, perhaps the ritual of the cult itself. But our inductee is moving away from her mother, who stands in rather elegant patrician clothing, and toward the rest of the scene, setting in motion her story. As she moves to the right, we see in the second scene here, she's beginning to take off her clothes, showing her slip underneath, and she's actually offering them to a second priestess. You can see she's not the same person because she's dressed differently, but our virgin inductee appears now a second time, and she's offering her clothes now to this figure. Notice the interesting three-dimensional space and how this priestess is seen directly from the back. She's assisted here by another young woman in a rather plunging cleavage-enhancing outfit, and immediately next to them there's a fat old gentleman with a beard playing a harp. Actually, it's a lyre. And this is one of Bacchus's friends, Silenus, who had actually been one of Bacchus's teachers when he was a child. And he is, in fact, a satyr, even though we don't see hooves. He normally has a tail as well. This leads us to the third scene on the far right, where now the Virgin appears a third time, swirling that piece of cloth over her head, dressed only in her slip underneath, and she's being whipped into a frenzy by another satyr, a younger one here, who is playing the panpipes, which you can see here, he's got pointy ears and horns. And in between the two, there's another woman. We don't quite know who she is, but she has a couple of animals with her. Given that these are satyrs, there's something bestial about it all. There's a goat here, and the second one here, and oddly, she is nursing the second goat. She has her breast out and is nursing this second wild animal. This is all very strange, and really this is why we refer to this as the Villa of the Mysteries. So what we've seen here is our virgin inductee, we see her 3 times within the image, is moving from left to right, and she's moving toward this far wall. And whereas we see 3 different scenes on the left wall, on the far wall we see a single scene. Bacchus is just off center here, and he's leaning in the lap of another goddess. We don't know exactly whom. He has this large staff with grapes on the top of it, leaning across his lap as he lounges languorously in the lap of this goddess. You might recognize this pose or remember it from Hellenistic Greek art, where the Romans got almost all of their inspiration. He looks very much like the sleeping satyr that we saw before, with the arm behind the head and this rather erotic drunken pose that he has. This is really where our virgin inductee has been going. On the left, another elderly servant of Bacchus is serving wine to 2 young boys. One of them is looking at his reflection in the wine bowl, and the other one is holding up a theatrical mask here, sort of a terrifying mask. And again, we're not quite sure what this all means, thus the label, the Villa of the Mysteries. On the opposite side, we see the Virgin again, the inductee into the cult, and she's kneeling down in front of a second goddess back here, who's mostly missing, and there's a winged dancing figure here, perhaps another of the consorts of Bacchus. But she's offering her clothing now to her, and you'll notice that she now carries a staff that's very similar to Bacchus's staff, which suggests that she's already been inducted, which means we probably shouldn't call her a virgin anymore, because that seems to have been part of the induction ceremony. So we've taken a bit of a jump in time. The sequence then concludes around the right-hand wall. The virgin, again, not a virgin anymore, is now given new clothes by a series of 3 figures. You'll notice in various states of disrobing, but they're going to put her clothes back on. So here she is again, being reclothed in the aftermath of the induction ceremony. In the second image, she's seated on a throne, and she's doing her hair. You can see she's combing it, and there's an image of Eros, the Roman Cupid, and he is holding up a mirror so she can admire her beauty in that mirror. And then finally, at the far side, she's now seated on her throne for eternity, and a cute little Eros figure next to her, looking off into the distance. It's all very erotic, and at the same time quite mysterious, and we remain very unsure of many of the details in this fresco cycle.